Now, the Conservative MP Philip Davies suggested in the Commons today that disabled people might benefit from being allowed to work for less than the minimum wage. He said that the minimum wage prevents those people from being given the opportunity to get to the first rung on the employment ladder. Campaigners for disabled people variously said this was nonsense, preposterous, outrageous and would take Britain back decades. Here's some of what Mr Davies had to say.
Now, when I went to visit Mind and I spoke to people there that were using the service offered by that charity, they were absolutely upfront with me, and they said that when they went for a job and they came across a situation where there was other people who'd applied for that job, they've got mental health problems, other people haven't. They said to me, who would you take on? Because they were quite accepting of the fact that it was inevitable that the employer would take on the person who hadn't got any mental health problems, given that they were both going to be having to be paid the same rate. Given that some of those people with a learning disability clearly, by definition, can't be as productive in their work as somebody who hasn't got a disability of that nature, then it was inevitable that given the employer was going to have to pay them both the same, they were going to take on the person who was going to be more productive, less of a risk, and that was doing those people a huge disservice. Now,
I'm joined now by the Conservative MP Philip Davies and by Liz Sayce of Radar, the leading organisation helping people with disabilities. Why should disabled people become cheap labour?
Well, I didn't solely feature disabled people in my speech. This is something that the media have latched onto. I actually made the point.
Well, you did say it, though. You absolutely did say it, and Downing Street repudiated it. No. You said it undermines fairness in the workplace.
No, I said that anybody who was having difficulty in accessing the jobs market should be able, if they chose to, they shouldn't have to, they shouldn't be expected to, but if they chose to, they were trying to build up some work experience and they weren't getting the opportunity, they should be able to, if they chose to work below the minimum wage.
So are you actually saying that disabled people were better off when there was no minimum wage?
Well, I was pointing out something that was said to me by people at Mind, the service users at Mind, who said that they encountered this problem when they went for job interviews.
Are you saying that people with disabilities were better off before the minimum wage?
Well, I made the point in my speech.
You're not saying it?
No, because I actually made the point.
You're not, so they weren't better off?
If you'd allow me to answer the question.
Well, I'm trying to get you to answer it.
I'm trying to answer the question. I did actually say in my speech that lots of people have benefited from the minimum wage. Right. Lots of people with disabilities, people without disabilities. But we've got to recognise we can bury our heads in the sand and pretend there isn't an issue. There's lots of people out there who haven't got a job, who actually are finding it very difficult to get a job. And for those people, some of the people are either former prisoners, people with disabilities, people who leave school with no qualifications. Actually, the status quo is doing them a great disservice.
Why did so many disability groups and representatives and people with disabilities find this really offensive?
Well, I think it was insulting to kind of assume that just because you're disabled that you're going to be less productive, have less to contribute. We need to think about the assets that people bring, and we also need to think about the support that people need in order to be productive. So if, for example, you're blind and you don't have the right software on your computer, then of course you're not going to be productive because you can't work on a par with everybody else.
Are you describing a world which we would like, which is people having much more equality of opportunity no matter what their background or what their disability may be? But that's not the world we live in. The world we live in is it's very competitive, tough to get a job, and people with disabilities, unfortunately, tend to be at the end of the queue.
Well, actually, I think for the last couple of decades we've been fighting hard for equality. We've got anti-discrimination law and employment rates of disabled people have been going up. And we now know, I've just done an independent review for government, we know what works, and it's not dropping the minimum wage. What it is support that is flexible for individuals and the employer knowing that there's somebody to turn to for advice if they need it. And there's all sorts of types of support that mean people with learning disabilities, who Philip mentioned, can have the systematic instruction they need to do a job. I've talked to people who learned if they've got jobs, they're being paid the minimum wage, they're buying things, they've got status with their families and their communities as never before.
So is she wrong?
No, not at all. There's all.
So she's right. So therefore everything's fine.
Well, no, it's not fine. I mean, what I'm saying might be unpalatable to people, but we've got a huge problem with lots of people who have got a disability and other people as well that haven't got disabilities who want a job, can't find a job, and we're in the preposterous situation where it's fine for somebody to go and work for nothing. If a disabled person went to an employer and said, "I'll work for nothing," that's fine. But if they said, "I want to work for £5 an hour to prove myself for a short period of time,"
why do you think Downing Street ran away from your comments like scolded dogs? I mean,
well, because they don't agree with me.
Yeah, because
they
They don't agree. They think you're fundamentally wrong, but they also think that plays into the chord that people want to strike about the Conservative Party as the nasty party.
Well, how people characterise what I've said is entirely up to them, but I'm actually highlighting a real issue for lots of people in the country, lots of vulnerable people, and we can pretend this isn't happening, we can pretend there isn't a problem, we can bury our heads in the sand. It's an unpalatable truth, but what I'm saying is happening with terms of employers being reluctant to take on people is true.
That bit is true, and Mr Davies says that some people with disabilities have said they would take a job at less than the minimum wage. Some people obviously work in voluntary work for nothing.
Well, I don't dispute that some people may have said that, but I've just done a review talking to hundreds of disabled people at all the disability organisations, and that is not what the majority of disabled people are saying. What they're saying is that we want fair chances to get jobs at least the minimum wage with the support to be able to do it. And it's not rocket science, you know, we can do this. And I think that otherwise we're just entrenching inequality. We're saying, you know, disabled people can work for less than the minimum wage. It sounds like exploitation to me.
But aren't you, Mr Davies' word, having your head in the sand about this, because it's a very competitive job market, as I've said, and employers will discriminate. Whether we think it's legal, whether we think it's good, they do that.
Well, I think what we need is the opportunity for disabled people to get into apprenticeships, to get internships, work experience, and that is a growing area. There are a number of employers that are doing very good work in this area, and there's also a law to challenge employers that are not doing their bit. I think things are gradually moving in the right direction, but as I say, I've just been doing a review, made a lot of recommendations to double the numbers of people who get the sort of support that will make this possible.
You don't want a minimum wage for anybody.
No, I think that I'd prefer it if it was a private matter between employers.
So no minimum wage.
But I've lost that argument. I think the world has moved on. Now we need to look at how particular vulnerable groups can access employment. It seems preposterous to me that we want more disabled people to be in internships where they're paid nothing, but it's totally offensive to suggest that they might take a job at £5 an hour. Surely it's more offensive that they get more jobs for nothing than for taking jobs at just below the minimum wage for a short period of time so they can prove themselves to an employer who might be reluctant.
OK, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you both very much. Thank you.